the power to heal and destroy. The Full Arcana. It was a day like any other in the Leaf Village as Naruto made his way to Team 7's usual meeting place. So far, the blonde had followed his normal routine. He woke up, ate about a week's supply of ramen, gathered and checked his ninja gear, set off for the bridge, and ignored the several glares that the villagers sent his way. As he approached his destination, the next item in Naruto's list was to shout, "Sakura-chan," to greet his female teammate. Leaning against the bridge's rail, Sakura sighed in annoyance. Great. Not only is Sasuke-kun late today, but now I'm left all alone with Naruto. The pink-haired girl ranted in her mind. What do you want, Naruto? She asked, not bothering to keep her distaste away from her words. Catching the aversion in the kunoichi's words, the blonde genin stopped in his tracks. She's angry. Did I do something to make her mad? The nervous Jinchuriki wondered. Knowing it was too early to get on Sakura's bad side, Naruto looked for a topic that would appease her, or at least distract her. So, where's Sasuke? At the mention of her crush, the pink-haired girl's demeanor completely changed. I don't know, she solemnly informed. He usually gets here before I do. I just hope that everything is all right. Sakura commented before going silent. The two shinobi stayed in awkward silence for what seemed to be an eternity, though in reality, it was merely 2 hours. Suddenly, a cloud of smoke burst out in the middle of the bridge, revealing Kakashi and Sasuke as it dissipated. Yo! The copy ninja nonchalantly greeted. You're late. Naruto immediately screamed at his sensei, still following his routine. Meanwhile, Sakura made her way towards the Uchiha. Sasuke-kun, where were you? I was starting to get worried. The kunoichi asked with genuine concern. Unfortunately for the young girl, her crush simply grunted an incoherent answer and walked past her. Sorry for the delay, guys, but I was having some trouble trying to find Sasuke. Kakashi apologized as he scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Liar, came the immediate retort from the raven-haired boy. You told me to wait at the entrance of the Uchiha compound. I had to stand there for almost 3 hours. The young Sharingan user said, clearly angry and annoyed at the wait. The silver-haired Jounin cleared his throat. Anyways, setting that aside, the copy ninja dismissed the issue. I called all of you out here to talk about a very important matter concerning the Chunin exam. I have already started discussing this with Sasuke. Kakashi explained. The Jinchuriki's eyes set on his teacher the moment the words Chunin exam were uttered. I wanted to talk to you about that too, Kakashi-sensei. The blonde genin exclaimed excitedly. You see, I don't think I have learned enough to try taking the exam. The spiky-haired boy admitted as he scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. So, I was wondering if, maybe, you could teach me some new jutsus? But only because my offensive arsenal is pretty limited with only Kage Bunshin. The young Leaf Nin explained his position, congratulating himself for the eloquent request. Now Kakashi felt ashamed. How could he continue with what he was about to say after hearing his student's earnest request? Nevertheless, this was something he had to do. He owed as much to his fallen teammate. At that moment, the silver-haired man could not have possibly imagined that his decision would ripple into a wave that will thunder throughout the shinobi world. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I can't, he answered, looking away from his orange-clad student. I'll be training Sasuke for the time until the exam starts. He just awakened his Sharingan, and I'm the only one that can instruct him on how to use it properly. The copy ninja explained. Naruto's eyes winded in disbelief at his teacher's words. Boo. But what about Sakura and me? We need training as much as Sasuke does. The blonde shouted, unable to comprehend his sensei's reasoning. Kakashi's guilt grew exponentially. How could he break the next piece of news to his young student when it would probably break him? But there was no way around it. Sakura, the Jounin turned to face his female student as the sight of his trembling, blonde charge became unbearable. You don't have to worry about your training. He did not have to look at Naruto to know of the renewed shock that invaded him. I talked with Kurenai-san and she has agreed to teach you since her students are all training with their respective clans. The Sharingan user informed solemnly. All 4 Leaf Nins remained silent. Sasuke had already known how tense the situation was going to be, but it was already proving too much and the Uchiha had no option but to look away from his teammate and stare into the water below the bridge. Sakura, Though she was happy that she was going to receive training from one of the top kunoichi that Konohagakure had to offer, could not help but feel sorry for Naruto. The fact that their teacher had not said a word from quite a few minutes led the Haruno towards one conclusion. But, but he cannot leave Naruto without training. I mean, the choice is obvious between him and Sasuke, but still, Kakashi-sensei is supposed to look after the training for all three of us. Her mind raged. After what had felt like an eternity, Naruto mustered enough courage to break the silence. Kakashi-sensei, and what about me? The blonde asked, not sure if he wanted to hear the answer. The silver-haired man's eye fell on the spiky-haired boy. Truthfully, it pained the Jounin doing this to his energetic student, but the decision had been made for him years ago on that collapsing cave. I am sorry, but I owed it to Obito. The man reasoned. Naruto, you just need to practice your chakra control, work on your taijutsu, and I'm sure that you will do great in the Chunin exam. Kakashi said, failing miserably to sound reassuring. Knowing that there was no way that he could do any more damage to his young charge short of stabbing him in the heart with a kunai, the copy nin dismissed himself and left his students to sort their minds. Staying in the bridge for a couple of minutes after his teacher's departures, Sasuke glanced at the broken blonde on his way out. The words, "I'm sorry," fought to come out of the Uchiha's mouth, but they failed, and the young Sharingan user simply walked away with his eyes set towards the ground. On the other hand, the concern Sakura was feeling towards the spiky-haired boy was becoming unbearable. It was not as though she liked the loud, annoying, clumsy, and fashionably challenged boy, but seeing him now so weak, quiet, and dim. How could Kakashi-sensei do this to Naruto? Yeah, he might be a little rough to work with, but he still needs proper training, she thought. Deciding it was best to head for the safety of his apartment before he broke down in front of Sakura, Naruto turned around and started to prepare himself to leave when he felt a soft hand on his shoulder. Naruto, are you alright? Sakura asked with genuine concern. On cue, a fake smile plastered itself in the blonde's face as he turned around to face the pink-haired girl. Of course I'm alright, Sakura-chan. The boy lied as he gave her his trademark grin. You heard Kakashi-sensei. I'm so good that I can train by myself and still amaze everyone at the exam with my incredible skills, he stated. Not buying the answer that she received, the kunoichi pressed on. Are you sure? The fake grin forcefully widened. Yeah, don't concern yourself with me, Sakura-chan. I'm fine, the genin responded. If you say so, the Haruno said defeated. Smiling gratefully at the small affection he had being shown, Naruto gave his teammate the closest thing to a true smile he could muster at the moment. Well, I have to go now. See you later, Sakura-chan. The spiky-haired shinobi exclaimed before he ran off. Sakura remained in the bridge for a couple of minutes until she could not see orange anymore. Sighing heavily and wishing both of her absent teammates the best of luck, the girl started heading home. Naruto continued to run past his apartment. The Jinchuriki ran and ran for several minutes until his energy finally gave out, and he was left walking slowly. The blonde was still trying to grasp the idea that his teacher had just simply abandoned him so that he could train his prodigy student. As the genin continued to wander throughout the village, his gaze was directed solely towards the ground. He could not see anything else. He did not want to see anything else, because if he so much as looked at his sides, or even front and back, the only thing that he would see would be the angry and condemning gazes of the villagers glaring at him. They did not need to say anything to express their opinion of the young Jinchuriki. Their eyes revealed everything. The blonde could not take it anymore. Forcing his body, Naruto started running once again. The spiky-haired boy moved towards the village's gate as fast as his feet would take him. The young shinobi would not dare to actually walk away from the village, but he just needed to get away from the villagers' spiteful glares, even if it was just for a moment. The instant he breathed the fresh air outside the village's walls, the blonde already felt better. There was no hostility plaguing his surroundings, just tranquility, so the spiky-haired boy decided to take a walk around the forest surrounding Konoha. As long as the boy did not wander in too deep, he would be all right. After a couple of hours simply wandering, Naruto decided to sit and relax under the shade of a tree. It's still early. I can take a nap for a few minutes and go back to the village before the gates are closed off, the blonde reasoned. With his decision made, the young shinobi closed his eyes and wandered off into a deep slumber. The dream started like any other. The blonde had to brave his way through dungeons of libraries and classrooms, rescue Sakura from the evil vegetable army, and was rewarded by becoming king of the Ramen Kingdom. Suddenly, Naruto's dream changed dramatically. The joyous illusion that his mind had conjured was corrupted by memories of his childhood. The genin found himself in his 5-year-old body being insulted, chased, kicked, beaten, and even burned by the villagers. The young man's nightmare seemed to focus on a particular painful incident. It was his 5th birthday, and the spiky-haired boy had committed the grave error of leaving the security of his apartment to go to the store and buy some ramen. As the young boy stepped out of his apartment and headed towards the store, some of the villagers spotted, and, before the child could even realize, a mob gathered. It was only until he reached the store that the boy became aware of the angry mass of villagers coming towards him. Knowing too well what his fate would be if the crowd caught up to him, the blonde forgot all about his business in the store and started off in a mad dash back towards his home. Sadly, the villagers ran after him and caught up to him soon enough. Before he knew it, the spiky-haired boy was totally surrounded by a wall of hatred. The killer intent permeating the surrounding was as strong as any wars. The 5-year-old stood completely terrified in the middle of it all. Why? Why do you hate me so much? The little blonde cried. Shut up, demon, someone shouted from the angry mob. It's time for you to pay for what you did to the village, a man exclaimed, and the crowd roared in agreement. And so, the beating began. They punched, kicked, and even threw rocks at the small blonde. In a matter of seconds, the little boy's body was reduced to a bloody mass. Looking up, to his horror, the beaten child could see that some of his aggressors were actually shinobi from the village, the people that were supposed to protect everyone. Naruto's vision became blurry, and soon all that he could see was crimson. Fortunately, before the red turned to black, the boy heard a voice shouting angrily over the mob. Stop! Forcing one of his eyes to focus, the boy was barely able to register the Hokage's silhouette standing before the dissipating crowd. The genin woke up with a start as tears ran down his cheeks. Shaking his nightmare off, the boy looked at his surroundings and realized that he had slept for longer than he had intended to. The forest around the young man was already dark. Deciding that it would be best to hurry toward the village before the gate closed, and he was left outside the wall, Naruto started off. The young shinobi had only taken a few steps before his body was left paralyzed by an incredibly strong presence nearby. The spiky-haired boy immediately got into a fighting stance. Whoever was nearby sure had a very menacing chakra. The noise coming from the trees let the Jinchuriki know that whoever was there, he was aware that his presence was no longer a secret and did not seem to care. Hearing steps behind him, Naruto turned around to meet the owner of the terrifying chakra. It is nice to finally get a chance to meet you, Naruto-kun. Breaking point. It is nice to finally get a chance to meet you, Naruto-kun. The young shinobi immediately turned around. Sao? Sasuke? The Jinchuriki questioned the figure standing before him. No, it can't be Sasuke. This guy? His presence is frightening, Naruto thought. Still, the appearance of the person in front of the genin was eerily similar to Sasuke's, with identical onyx color hair and a face that would make the girls go crazy. Taking a closer look, the blonde realized several different aspects that prove his first theory wrong. The newcomer was taller than Sasuke, had 2 long streaks between his eyes, and, perhaps the most apparent feature for the spiky-haired boy, a scratched leaf headband. There was no way that this person was Sasuke. Oh, the man's voice snapped Naruto out of his thoughts. I'm sorry, but I am not my dear little brother, the stranger added with an amused tone. The genin's eyes widened at the new revelation. Brother? Wait a minute. Naruto, Sasuke said weakly after being caught by his teammate. He's still out there. My brother. The wounds that Haku had inflicted on him seemed to be making it hard for the Uchiha to even breathe. I promised myself that I would stay alive. Until I kill him. Naruto, don't let your dream die. This was him. The person who Sasuke wanted to kill so much, he had ended up killing his own personality. My name is Uchiha Itachi. The missing mean casually presented himself. He was wearing a black cloak with a pattern of red clouds around it, while a fully matured Sharingan shined ominously in his eyes. "You have no idea how long I wanted to meet you, Naruto-kun," the young man added. At those words, the blonde took a step back. "How do you know who I am?" the young shinobi asked. The black-haired man simply regarded the boy before him for a couple of seconds. "Oh, I know more about you than you may think," Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, Itachi revealed with a hint of amusement. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. Even if the man in front of him had once been a leaf nin once, he was too young to have fought the Kyuubi during its original attack on the village, which meant that the knowledge of the fox's true fate should have been kept a secret from him. "For the expression in your face, I can infer that you already know of the existence of the bijou inside of you." The young man let out a sound that resembled a short laugh. "Figures that they would break their own law," the Uchiha commented. Narrowing his eyes at the older shinobi, Naruto's anger started to get the best of him. "So what if I know?" he asked. "What's it to you?" The black-haired man gave the faintest of shrugs. "I do not really care if they told you or not," Itachi confessed. "What I am more interested in is in how much of the bijou's power you can control." The missing nin added. "Control?" The Jinchuriki thought as his eyes widened once again. What the hell does he mean by that? His mind ranted in confusion. The spiky-haired boy could remember the power boost he had received from his contact with the fox's chakra during his battle with Haku, but he could not even begin to imagine that such thing could be controlled. The pair of Sharingan eyes continued to analyze the young shinobi. "It seems that you have already been able to tap into the Kyuubi's chakra," Itachi correctly commented, finding some amusement in the blonde's surprised face. Those who truly knew Itachi would know that he having more fun than he had in years. "That is good. You are already starting to develop your abilities and begun growing into your role as Jinchuriki. And with the Kyuubi as your bijou, you will truly become a powerful one," the Uchiha finished. Inside his head, Naruto Brain was review the missing nin's words over and over again, but he just could not understand. "What the hell do you mean by my role as Jinchuriki?" the boy questioned when he could not formulate an answer by himself. A sigh escaped the black-haired man, but decided to ease the genin's confusion. "Jinchuriki means human sacrifice. It is a testament to how far the hidden villages are willing to go to secure power." The Sharingan user began explaining. "They are willing to doom one of their own into a life of isolation and hatred simply for a chance to harness the bijou's power and turn a human into a weapon." Naruto remained silent after the older shinobi's words. "So, that's what I am." His gaze dropped to the floor. "A human sacrifice, meant to become a weapon," he said with a low whisper. "Yes," Itachi curtly confirmed. "And now that that's clear, I am going to ask you to come with me," the former Leaf Nin said, knowing that from here on out things will get more complicated. Immediately, the blonde's disposition changed into a defensive one. "What? What do you mean coming with you?" the spiky-haired boy questioned as he took several steps back. Another sigh escaped the missing nin. "You see, Naruto-kun, I am part of an organization called Akatsuki," he explained nonchalantly, "and it is in the organization's best interests to come to Konoha and collect you," the Uchiha added. "Normally we work in pairs, but my partner had a little detour and could not make it tonight." The young man spoke as if he were discussing his favorite onigiri recipe. "I was supposed to wait until he came back to secure you, but fortunately you decided to take a walk around the forest after hours just to make it easier for me. I thank you for that," he finished. As a defense mechanism, the genin shot back. "What? Are you so weak that you need a bodyguard just to enter the village?" Naruto exclaimed as fear and dread invaded his mind and clouded his judgment. Itachi decided to play along. "No, it is not that. I simply would like to carry out missions with the least trouble possible," he answered as his Sharingan bored into the younger shinobi. "And it is notably difficult to sneak into a village where you once slaughtered one of its most prominent clans," the missing nin said with a small smirk, "especially when it was you own." The revelation sent the Jinchuriki into a world of shock. The spiky-haired boy had heard that the Uchiha clan had been massacred in a single night, but he had never imagined that the culprit had been a single person. So you're the reason why the Uchiha clan is no more. That's why Sasuke wants to kill you," The terrified blonde stated. The small smirk became slightly more marked. Yes. The young man moved his upper body faintly forwards as if giving spiky-haired boy a small bow. Uchiha Itachi, at your service. Suddenly, a frightening killer intent permeated the surroundings. Immediately, the younger shinobi turned around and started off towards the village. Naruto could not hear the missing nin's footsteps behind him, but he could feel the killer intent catching up with him, getting closer and closer for every step forward that the blood took. Unexpectedly, the presence behind the blonde vanished. At the moment of false security, Naruto committed a grave error. Stopping his mad dash towards the village's gates, the spiky-haired boy looked around trying to find where his pursuer had disappeared to. All of a sudden, the genin felt a hand grab him by the collar, and before the boy knew what had happened, his body was violently pinned against a tree. Okay, Naruto-kun, now it's time for you to come with me, Itachi said as his figure appeared right in front of the boy. Like hell I will. The Jinchuriki responded. Naruto flailed his legs trying to kick the Uchiha, but none of his kicks seemed to make contact. With an impressive display of physical strength, the black-haired man threw the blonde towards another tree. The blonde hit the trunk with a sickening impact and fell to the ground. When he finally looked up, azure eyes met the Sharingan. Right in front of the genin, the Uchiha's dojutsu started to transform. In each eye, the black comas seemed to change and come together until they formed what looked like a three-pointed shuriken. The only thing that Naruto was able to hear was the word Tsukuyami being uttered with Itachi's voice before he was unexpectedly tied up to the tree's trunk and his surroundings completely changed. What the hell just happened? He thought. Where's that bastard? What is this place? The boy questioned as he looked around one more time. The large number for trees in Konoha's forest had been severely scaled down, and the few that remained were all black and dead, and the dark night sky had been completely covered by a blood-crimson color. Suddenly, several figures of Itachi appeared surrounding the Jinchuriki. The forms were completely black, except for the crimson color of their odd Sharingan eyes. Welcome to the Tsukuyami world, Naruto-kun. The Itachi right in front of the spiky-haired boy said. This is a jutsu that can only be created with these. He took a moment to point at his strange dojutsu. The Manjikyu Sharingan, the ultimate form of the Uchiha bloodline. The former Leaf Nin informed. Naruto simply remained silent, paralyzed by fear and dread. Now, this jutsu might only last for a second. The black-haired man continued, ignoring the younger shinobi's terror. But take my word for it can feel like days. He added with a mocking tone, since the Tsukuyami world give its caster complete control over reality. The Uchiha said as raised one of his hands, and a crow suddenly flew down and landed on it. The bounded blonde watched in shock as the raven in the missing nin's hand suddenly turned into a kunai and then into a katana. You are at my mercy for the next 3 days, Itachi said, his tone getting darker with every word. Naruto's eyes completely filled with terror. He was trapped inside a strange and frightening world controlled by a man who had killed his entire family in cold blood. Even his childhood beatings seemed like a fond memory compared to his current situation. Now, the Uchiha's voice snapped the genin back into attention. From what I have gathered, your teammates are my foolish littler brother and that pink-haired girl that was all over him, right? And Kakashi-senpai is your jounin instructor. Am I wrong? The young man asked. I am really disappointed of him, only looking after 2 of his students and leaving one of them without any form of training whatsoever. He commented, letting his target know under how much surveillance he had been under. Gritting his teeth at his captor's words, Naruto's gaze fell on the floor. A faint smirk appeared in Itachi's face. Do you want to know why he did that, Naruto-kun? The black-haired man asked. Suddenly, another Itachi appeared right next to the restricted Jinchuriki, leaning closer to the boy's ear so that the genin could barely hear him whisper. Because he hates you. All of them hate you. In an instant, Itachi and all of his replicas disappeared, and 3 new figures started to emerge from the ground, taking the form of Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura, and each holding a kunai in hand. The 3 clones stood in front of the captured Naruto and remained silent for a whole several minutes before Kakashi finally stepped forward. It is time for you to pay for what you did to the village, Demon. The blonde heard his sensei's voice exclaimed, echoing his nightmare. Kakashi-san. Before the blonde could finish, the fake Jounin stabbed him in the gut with his kunai. Grare. The Jinchuriki screamed as the very real pain permeated his entire body. Panting heavily as his blood started to flow down to the ground, the young boy forced his head up to gaze at the figures of his teammates. Sasuke. Sao. Sakura. He let out. The first to move was the black-haired boy. Everybody in the village hates you. We would all be better off if you just died. The Uchiha proclaimed before his kunai impaled the blonde. Naruto's eyes were blinded for a few seconds. The Genin didn't know if it was because of the horrifying pain that plagued his body, or from the terrible scream he let out due to said pain. Struggling with his blurry eyesight, the Jinchuriki could barely discern a red and pink figure approaching him. No, not you two, he said weakly. Sakura's clone simply glared at the blonde in response. You have no idea how sickening it is being having to deal with you every day, she stated. I despise you with all of my heart. Do us all a favor and die already. The pink-haired girl shouted before stabbing the boy in his chest, inches away from his crumbling heart. Gaiart. The young Jinin's cry resounded through the crimson sky. Panting through the echo of his own screams, Naruto could not even find enough strength to raise his head again. Why? Why? Why do you hate me this much? The broken blonde questioned. Tears ran down his sorrowful face and mixed with his blood in the ground. Soon, the piercing pain of the kunais returned time and time again. Die. I thought you cared for me. Disappear. I never did anything. Why don't you just die? Please. We hate you. Please, stop. There will never be a place for you in the village. Stop. We can't wait for your death. Stop. I can't take it anymore. Don't you see? A dark and twisted version of Kakashi's voice said. We don't care about you. We never did. All that we want is for you to die and rot in hell. Through pained cries and sobs, Naruto shook his head. No, the whisper was barely audible. The stabs came in even faster, accompanied by the calls for the Jinchuriki's death by the three attackers. As the torture continued, time became irrelevant, truth became twisted, the assailants' shouts became enhanced and hypnotic, and pain became overwhelming and all-consuming, until... Stop! As if something had been ripped right from the fabric of the Tsukuyomi world, a powerful shockwave spread throughout the surroundings, and the captured blonde was covered by a light blue chakra. Out of sight, a faint smirk formed in Itachi's face as he watched the Genin's chakra gradually turning orange and growing stronger with each passing second. Finally, he's starting to draw out the fox's chakra. The former Leaf Nin reasoned as he continued to observe the situation develop. Guard. Naruto's thoughts were torrential. The Biju's chakra was running rampant throughout his body, and, with every passing moment, the blonde could feel an overpowering hatred building up inside of him. Kit. A new voice broke through the boy's turmoil. Calm down. You're absorbing too much chakra at an alarming rate. Kit. The voice sounded scared and desperate. Calm down. It repeated its plea, but it was left unheard as the Jinchuriki's chakra pulse suddenly became stronger. Already completely surrounded by the terrifying orange chakra, the Genin was hyperventilating, feeling that his body would be crushed by the pressure of the sudden power surge until... Gaiart. With a sudden spike of power, Naruto's chakra burst, taking a dark blue color and blowing all of his teammates' figures away. I hate you. I hate you all. He screamed as his power continued to increase. Sharingan's eyes widened in surprise. Incredible, he was able to subjugate Kyuubi's chakra, and his killer intent has become terrifyingly powerful. The Uchiha thought in amazement. I will destroy everything. Everything. The boy continued screaming. With each shout, the Tsukuyomi world's crimson sky flashed back to normal. Worry started to seep into the missing Nin. How is it possible? He is actually breaking through Tsukuyomi. The black-haired man's mind raged. The Jinchuriki could feel the power building up inside of him. This world can go to hell, Naruto proclaimed, and with one more chakra spike, he sent an even more powerful shockwave blowing the Tsukuyomi world and its caster away. The Sharingan user found himself back in the forest of Konoha with a cloud of dust hovering in front of him where his target had previously stood. Scanning the chaos of small debris as the dust begun to settle, Itachi could see the Genin's figure started to become visible. Naruto stood in the middle of a small crater gazing up at the sky, his eyes looking through the clouds and setting on a bright and imposing moon. Ever so slowly, the Jinchuriki's eyes lowered and focused on the former leaf Nin in front of him. The Uchiha's Sharingan eyes widened in shock at the sight before them. Impossible. There is no way, he muttered. How can he? Bloodlines combined. Naruto stood in the middle of a small crater gazing up at the sky, his eyes looking through the clouds and setting on a bright and imposing moon. Ever so slowly, the Jinchuriki's eyes lowered and focused on the former leaf Nin in front of him. The Uchiha's Sharingan eyes widened in shock at the sight before them. Impossible. There is no way, he muttered. How can he? Itachi's eyes gazed directly into the Genin's. The blonde's eyes no longer held their shining sapphire hue. Instead, just like the boy's chakra, they had taken a dramatically darker tone into navy blue. Still, the most surprising and prominent features presented in Naruto's gaze were the three white commas accompanied by a white that appeared in both eyes. How can he have the Sharingan? The Akatsuki member questioned in astonishment. Snapping out of his trance at the older shinobi's voice, Naruto's mind tried to process what the missing nin's words had meant. Sharingan. What is he talking about? The Jinchuriki looked at this surroundings, and he immediately sensed something was odd. To the young blonde's eyes, it was as if everything around him was in slow motion. Not a single detail escaped the boy's gaze. From the fluttering leaves to the swaying branches, his eyes were capturing anything and everything. A couple of feet away, Itachi was finally starting to recover from the shock brought about by the new development. This certainly complicates things, his Manjikyu narrowing as he reanalyzed the situation. No matter what, I must act quickly now, otherwise, the black-haired man murmured to himself. Naruto had already completely forgotten about the missing Nin that had been torturing him a few moments ago. Instead, the blonde's eyes gazed around in a new trance. When his eyes finally caught sight of the strangely shaped Sharingan once again, the Jinchuriki heard the word that had ignited his hell. Tsukuyami. Immediately, the sky above the Genin started to change. Dread started to seep into the young boy at the idea of spending any more time in that dark and cruel world, but no matter how much he searched his mind, he could not think of a way to stop the Jinjutsu. Kit, your eyes. Send chakra to your eyes now. A voice thundered inside Naruto's head. The Jinchuriki was taken back by the sudden intrusion of his thoughts. Who are you? The boy asked. Why are you in my head? Despite not getting any answer, the blonde decided to worry about it later and follow the voice's advice nevertheless, and channeled chakra towards his eyes. Suddenly, some sort of flash of light went off in the clearing and Itachi found himself being thrown backwards, his back soon hitting a tree. What? The Uchiha's mind raged. Did the fox do this? He wondered as he looked at the leaf Nin standing in front of him. No, only another Manjikyu could throw off the Tsukuyami so easily. The shocked missing Nin reasoned. The new turn of events filled the blonde with confidence. Deciding to go into the offensive, Naruto took out a kunai and charged towards the black-haired man. Letting his trained reflexes take control, Itachi immediately took out a kunai of his own and brought it forward to block the incoming attack. Both blades clashed with each other and sent a small shockwave through their surroundings. Because of his smaller size, Naruto was thrown back by the backlash of the impact, but landed safely on his feet, while Itachi simply lost his balance and fell back against the tree again. Damn it, my chakra is already running low after using Tsukuyami, the former Konoha shinobi thought. Damn you, Kisame. You were supposed to be here. You know how important this is. The Uchiha thought of his partner somewhere in the land of waves paying his respects to the grave of an old comrade. Fighting back the growing fatigue, Itachi stood up once more and straightened his cloak. Well, Naruto-kun, this truly is an unexpected turn of events. You having the Sharingan, I mean. The Uchiha said casually. To say it has complicated my plans would be an understatement. A small, ominous smirk appeared on the young man's face. Despite the nonchalant tone of the missing nin's words, the Jinchuriki could not help but still be unnerved by the cloaked nin's mere presence. A dark snicker escaped the black-haired shinobi at the sight of the blonde, taking a wary step back. How about we leave your capture for another day? The smirk grew as the genin's strange Sharingan widened. I will see you soon, Naruto-kun. With those words, Itachi's body turned completely black and dissipated as a group of ravens, leaving a confused and astonished boy behind. Once he was unable to feel the Uchiha's presence, Naruto let go of a heavy breath and fell into the ground. Looking up at the top of the trees, once again contemplating how the leaves still seemed to be moving at slow motion. Several minutes passed until the Jinchuriki jumped back onto his feet and made his way towards the village. In his first stroke of luck in the whole day, the genin made it back to the gates just as they were about to close them off. The guards pay him no mind, and he was careful not to do anything that might attract attention towards himself as he passed by them. Once officially inside the village, the boy jumped on top of a building and started to leap from roof to roof as he tried to organize his chaotic thoughts. After a couple of minutes of hopping around, Naruto finally stopped. The blonde knew that it had not been his teammates who tortured and attacked him inside the world created by the weird Jinjutsu. But even though most of what the illusions had seen had been false, at least some of it was true. The village saw him as nothing more than a demon, a social pariah, a target for all of their hatred. Who knows, after what he had seen earlier in the day, perhaps his teammates would truly react like that if they ever found out what he was, if they found out what dwelled inside of him. With his current instability, there were only two persons that Naruto still felt he could really trust. Taking a deep breath, the Jinchuriki turned around and started off towards the Hokage's building to find one of them. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage, sat on his desk glaring at a mountain of paperwork courtesy of the upcoming Chunin exams. Suddenly, the aged shinobi felt an exceptionally large chakra reading coming straight towards his office at an alarming speed. Before the third could leave his seat, the window in one side of the room snapped upon and an orange blur stepped into the room. The village leader would have attacked the intruder immediately were not for the familiar voice whispering, "Old man." The Hokage's eyes widened in surprise. "Naruto-kun, is that you? What brings you to my office at this hour?" He questioned, managing to compose himself right away. Upon further observation of the young shinobi, Sarutobi was left speechless at the even bigger surprise that greeted him. "Naruto, your eyes," the third whispered. A pair of blue and white Sharingan eyes looked from the older leaf Nin onto the floor. "So it is true," Naruto commented. The Jinchuriki started to look around the room until he found a small mirror and walked towards it. The sight that greeted the genin was that of a blond young man with a pair of blue and white Sharingan eyes. The fully developed dojutsu shined with an ominous luster in pools of night blue color. "Naruto-kun." The Sandaime's words snapped the spiky-haired boy out of his thoughts. "Please, tell me what happened," the older shinobi requested. The Jinchuriki spent the next hour telling the Hokage everything that had happened to him on that day, from Team 7's meeting by the bridge to his trip out of the village, the encounter with the missing Nin Uchiha Itachi, and culminating with him rejecting the Tsukimi Jinjutsu. Everything was laid bare in front of the leader of Konohagakure. By the end of his tale, Sarutobi looked the oldest that Naruto had ever seen him. The old man's breath was labored, and the tears that threatened to spill only complemented his pained expression. Naruto had to look away. He really did not like to see his Hokage looking so weak and feeble. "But what I don't understand," the spiky-haired boy started again, "is how do I have the Sharingan?" He brought into question. The third sighed and took a minute to compose himself. "I am truly sorry, Naruto-kun, for I have kept much from you," the seasoned shinobi informed before standing up from his chair and walking towards a drawer. "I never imagined that something like this would happen," he commented as he searched the drawer until he pulled out a blue folder from it. Sarutobi walked back to his desk and sat down. The genin quietly waited as the aged man regarded the blue folder for several minutes before the Hokage opened it, took out a photograph, and gave it to him. Looking down at the picture, a pair of Sharingan eyes widened. It was a picture of a young woman wearing a red variant of the Konoha Jounin's uniform. and she was the most beautiful being that the Leaf Neen had ever seen. She had alabaster skin that contrasted with her long and dark onyx hair, and a vibrant smile that would light up the darkest and stormiest of days. Naruto didn't know why, but for some reason he could not stop the tears that ran down his face as he gazed at the photo. Her name is Uchiha Kagome. Sarutobi's voice cut through the blonde's trance. She was one of the Leaf's most promising kunoichi, he said with a mix of pride and nostalgia. Her exploits during the last war earned her the name of the Uchiha's Crimson Raven due to her mastery over the Sharingan and her tendency of using crows as a theme for her jutsus, especially Jinjutsus. The Sandame seemed lost in a memory. Yes, she was especially skilled in Jinjutsu. She could easily fool an entire room filled with members of the Uchiha and Hyuga clan, and no one would ever realize it. Naruto's eyes narrowed. She was? The aged shinobi closed his eyes for a second. Yes, he sorrowfully answered. She died the day the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked after giving birth to her son. Sarutobi's eyes set on the young genin as the boys widened. She is your mother, Naruto-kun, he revealed. Out of sheer surprise, the younger shinobi had to take a step back. What do you mean, my mother? I'm not an Uchiha. I don't even look like one. The boy protested as his eyes glared at the Hokages. The Sandame gaze dropped to the floor momentarily before moving up towards the portraits of the previous Hokages. Yes, you do not look like a member of the Uchiha clan. But that is because you inherited your physical traits from your father, Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, Sarutobi stated. Naruto's eyes almost doubled in size as they widened. The fourth? Is my father? He exclaimed, unable to believe what he was hearing. The third nodded. Yes. Few people knew of the relationship between Minato and Kagome, and even less people knew that they were expecting a child. The village leader informed. After you were born and became an orphan, we thought it would be safer to give you another name. Your parents already had their share of enemies, and the child of an elite Uchiha and a Hokage would not go unnoticed by the shinobi world. So, in order to protect you, you became Uzumaki Naruto, Sarutobi said as guilt hung strongly onto his voice. A dull and mirthless laugh escaped the blonde. I always wondered about my parents. The boy confessed. I came to think that perhaps I never had any, and instead I just sprout right out of the ground. The tears that ran down his cheeks framed his frail and fake smile. But I guess that I did have parents, even if it was for only an hour or so. Sarutobi would not have been surprised if his eyes were crying too. Yes, you did, Naruto-kun. He started, and both of them loved you with all of their hearts. The aged man assured the young boy. Kagome put her life on the line to bring you into this world, and Minato gave up his to create a seal that would allow the Kyuubi's chakra to flow into you so that it would protect you. The thread gave the spiky-haired genin a couple of minutes to let his words sink in. Their last wish was for you to grow up into a strong and healthy man that would be able to accomplish any and all of his dreams. I was planning to tell you all of this once you were ready, and I am sorry I did not realize that you have been for a long time now. The Hokage stressed his apology by giving the blonde a small bow. Another smile formed on the Jinchuriki's face, and, though small, this one stronger and brighter. Even if he didn't fully show it, the young man was the happiest he had been ever since he became a shinobi. The knowledge of who his parents had been and the fact that he was truly loved by them filled the genin with warmth. Still, somewhere in his joy, something captured Boy's attention. Hold on a second, old man. The blonde said. You mentioned that you never expected that I would awaken the Sharingan. Why is that? He questioned. The Hokage sighed. He knew that this question was fast approaching. Well, you see, the Namikaze and Uchiha bloodlines are too dominant. They tend to overpower any other genetic traits that they come in contact with. The idea that the two bloodlines would found a middle ground and compromise with each other was unthinkable. The third watched as the spiky-haired boy brought a hand to his eyes. So, when I looked at you for the first time and saw that you were the spitting image of your father, I thought that the Namikaze bloodline had won out. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement at the explanation. So, this Sharingan is. It was the Sandame's turn to nod. Prove that I was wrong and that the Uchiha and Namikaze traits somehow found a way to fuse together. Saratobi stated, "From what you told me, I think that it is safe to infer that, when you started to forcibly drain the Kyuubi of his chakra, it worked as a catalyst that combined the two bloodlines." He explained and waited for the young shinobi to show his understanding. "And I even venture the guess that, after what you said happened when Itachi tried to use his Jinjutsu a second time, your Sharingan is showing traits of the Mijinkyu Sharingan, the next step in the Uchiha Dojutsu." A pensive look took over the Jinchuriki's features. Yes, Itachi had it. A weirdly shaped Sharingan. Naruto pointed out. The Hokage considered his words for a couple of minutes. "Do you eyes feel tired, Naruto-kun?" he asked, realizing that the young Genin must have had his dojutsu activated since it was first awakened. The Jinchuriki looked at the older shinobi with a confused face. "No, not really." The boy responded as he shook his head. "Do me a favor, and please concentrate in cutting off the chakra flow to you eyes, Naruto-kun," the Sandame requested. The village leader watched as the white comas disappeared from the blonde's eyes, and the dark blue color reverted to their original sapphire hue. Naruto blinked several times as the strange slow-motion sensation he had been feeling disappeared. Effortlessly shaking off the weird feeling, everything went back to normal for the genin. Saratobi waited for the young man to give him a sign that he was okay before starting again. The Manjikyu Sharingan is a very corrosive Kekkei Genkai. Even after its first use, the casters are left exhausted, drained of most of their chakra, and actually experiencing physical pain. The fact that you can stand there before me shows that your Sharingan should be able to access the Manjikyu's abilities while bypassing its terrible toll. The young Jinchuriki was genuinely surprised by the revelation, remembering how the fluttering leaves looked through his Sharingan and his escape from Itachi's second try at the strange Jinjutsu. Suddenly, the Hokage stood up from his chair. "I have something for you, Naruto-kun. Please wait a moment," he announced as he stepped out of the room, leaving the genin alone in the office. Naruto collapsed onto one of the chairs in the room. A lot had happened during the last couple of hours, and the blonde was still letting it sink in. "Some day we're having, don't you think so, Kit?" At the sound of those words, the leaf nin jumped out of his chair. "Who are you?" he called out. He. The laughter sounded very close to the spiky-haired boy. "Are you so stupid that you already forgotten what that Mizuki bastard told you, Kit?" The voice questioned. The Jinchuriki's eyes widened. "The fox," he exclaimed. "Since when can you talk to me?" The genin asked, astonished. Another laugh escaped the bijou, but it soon turned sour. "Since you severely weakened the seal as you stole most of my chakra," the fox bitterly commented. "Talk about hollowed victories, right, Kit?" Sapphire eyes narrowed. "What do you mean most of your chakra?" he asked with caution. "I mean just that, idiot," Kyuubi exclaimed inside his head, making the young shinobi cringe. "You took almost all of my chakra, and now I'm as dangerous as the monster you thought lived by the vegetable products aisle at the market," the fox exclaimed. Naruto had to scratch his head at the new revelation. "So, I'm as powerful as you. Were. Huh." The sealed bijou laughed. "Now, listen here, kid, and listen well. You may have possession of my chakra, but there is no way in hell that you can control it as you are now." The fox explained. "You are just as strong as you were this morning, sans despicable dojutsus, of course. The only difference right now is that your colossal chakra supply just got larger." The blonde nodded at the Kyuubi's words as he sat down again. "Then where do we stand now, regarding your chakra?" The once feared entity took a couple of moments to think the question over. "You would still need to learn how to properly tap into it and control it," he informed his host. "And believe me when I said this, it is going to be a hard and painful process." The bijou added, taking joy at the wince from his jailer. "But don't worry, those damn eyes of yours should help you with it," he added, opting to appease the boy a bit. "Okay," Naruto muttered. "But then what's going to happen to you, now that your chakra is gone?" The dark laugh that the fox let out did not set too well with the blonde. Worry about me, are you?" he teased. "It seems that this is it for me. I will be doomed to spend the rest of my life wandering around in this poor excuse of a mind, watching everything that you do and pointing out all of your flaws." Kyuubi announced a dumbstruck blonde. "Think of me as your brand new conscience." The Jinchuriki sighed in frustration through the Bija's laughter. Oh good. I get a new conscious whose idea of a good time is leveling an entire village to the ground. The boy thought, renewing the laughter for his tenant. After several minutes passed, Sarutobi re-entered the room, carrying a couple of scrolls with him. Well, Naruto-kun, since Kakashi seems to have neglected your training, I will be taking over. The Hokage announced, allowing himself a small smile at the look of surprise in the Genin's face. Sadly, I have to deal with some official matters regarding the Chunin exam, meaning that we will not be able to start your training until at least next week, so I am leaving you some homework until then. The Sandaime added as he placed the scrolls on the table. Naruto could not help himself, and, at the mention of the word homework, his mind flashed back to his academy days, causing the Jinchuriki to groan in frustration. Nevertheless, the blonde picked up the scroll closest to him and started looking over it. A small chuckle escaped the Hokage as he separated a group of scrolls from the rest. The scroll that you are reading, along with these, contain information about a couple of jutsus that I thought it would be good for you to learn. He informed before setting aside 3 other parchments. While these 3 regard the Uchiha clan, a bit of its history, fighting style, special jutsus related to the clan, as well as information about the Sharingan. The spiky-haired boy nodded his understanding of the older shinobi's words. Watching over the scrolls presented in front of him, the blonde's eyes set on the small black scroll that the village leader had kept isolated from the others. And this last one, the third continued as he picked the black scroll, contains information on the Manjikyu Sharingan, as well as instruction on how to use its 2 special jutsus, Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu. I am particularly inclined for you to learn those 2 techniques. Sarutobi said as he handed the small scroll to his new student. I want you to read all of this material during the last couple of days. You do not have to put it to practical use just yet, but I expect for you to know all this information before we start training. Am I clear? He asked. The Jinchuriki nodded to accept his task before he started to gather the scrolls, and the Hokage moved back to his chair. Sitting behind his desk once more, the Sandaime regarded the Genin. Now, I want you to consider for a moment before you answer me this question. The experienced shinobi waited until the sapphire orbs fell on him. You are old enough to decide this for yourself. Do you want me to make your heritage public, Naruto-kun? He asked. The boy's eyes fell to the floor as he pondered. After several minutes in silence, Naruto lifted his gaze back to the Hokage. No, he said in a determined but solemn voice. Accepting the Genin's answered, the third continued. And what about Kakashi? The blonde remained pensive for a while before nodding. How much should I tell him? The blonde sighed as he considered. You can tell him about my parents. He finally answered. But not about my Sharingan. I don't want him to know about it. The spiky-haired boy said as his fist tightened. Very well, Naruto-kun. Sarutobi said before giving the younger Leaf Nin a smile. That only leaves us with the matter of your Sharingan, he announced. A confused look was directed towards the village leader. My Sharingan? The Genin asked. Nodding, the third smile grew slightly. Yes, from what you told me, your Sharingan differs from any other of its variants, making it a new dojutsu. The aged man explained. So, as a new dojutsu, it needs a name. Naruto was taken back by the announcement for a couple of seconds before he started thinking over it. Gradually, the young man's eyes drifted towards the open window in the office as he contemplated his dojutsu. Sky, the Jinchuriki said before returning his gaze to the Hokage. Sora Sharingan. Its name is Sora Sharingan, the shinobi declared. The Hokage nodded and smiled warmly once more. The blonde gave his leader a small bow before starting to walk toward the door. Suddenly, the Genin stopped on his tracks. Is something wrong, Naruto-kun? Sarutobi asked with concern. Sapphire eyes shined brightly as the blonde looked back. No, he said. I just wanted to thank you. For everything, old geezer. The spiky-haired boy said before giving the older shinobi a true, real smile, before turning around and walking out of the office. A sigh escaped the Sandaime. It is good to see that this terrible ordeal was not able to fully break your vibrant spirit, Naruto-kun. The Hokage whispered to himself as he smiled. Please forgive me. The third sat in his office early in the morning. He had sent somebody to look for Kakashi and, knowing him, Hiruzen had at least 2 hours before he showed up. Sighing, the Hokage tried to find something to distract himself. Briefly, he considered one of those colorful books that Jiraiya had sent him. Suddenly, with a cloud of smoke, the copy ninja appeared in the Hokage's office, just as the seasoned shinobi had built up enough courage to start reading his previous student's novel. "You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama?" The silver-haired man asked. "Yes, Kakashi. I wanted to talk to you about Naruto." Sarutobi replied. "Did you know that he was attacked last night?" He questioned. "What happened? Is he all right?" Shocked at the piece of news, the Jounin immediately asked in concern. Then, after a second, anger at his student being attacked started to set in. "Who did it?" he asked, expecting it to be one of those brainless villagers that still viewed Naruto as a demon. The answer he received surprised him even more than the news that one of his Jinin students was attacked within the past 24 hours. Sarutobi looked directly into Kakashi's eye and responded, "Uchiha Itachi." Needless to say, it took the Hiate's brain a couple of seconds to process the fact that an S-rank criminal had attacked one of his students. "You can't be serious, Hokage-sama. Uchiha Itachi attacking Naruto? How could that happen?" The Hokage looked at the copy ninja with a bit of disappointment. It seems that after your team meeting, Naruto was feeling a bit distraught. So he decided to take a break from the ignorance of the villages and fell asleep outside the village. He informed. It was when he was making his way back that he was attacked by the missing Nin, Uchiha Itachi. Sarutobi explained. Kakashi kept silent for a few moments. He knew too well what the Sandame had meant by distraught. "Hokage-sama, you have to understand. I feel it is my obligation with Obito. Sasuke is from the same clan, and he needs somebody to train him on his bloodline." The silver-haired man tried to get his point across. "And I believe that I am the best choice, since I'm the only one who still have a Sharingan and is still affiliated to the village," he said in his defense. The third simply shook his head in response. "So you owed to your fallen teammate?" He reiterated the point that the younger shinobi had tried to make. "What about your sensei? You do know that Naruto is his son, do you not?" The Hokage asked. The copy ninja looked down at the floral. He was one of the few people that actually knew that Naruto was the Yandame's son, though he never knew who the mother was. But still he could not help but feel that his debt with Obito was far larger. "I know, Hokage-sama, but still, Sasuke is that last of Obito's clan. He would have wanted me to train him." The Jounin desperately wanted to explain himself. By now, the Hokage was beginning to get angry. "You think that Obito would have wanted you to focus only on training Sasuke?" Sarutobi's eyes were a combination of anger and disappointment. "Please, do not insult his memory." The comment hurt Kakashi. How could the Hokage even think that he would do anything to insult his teammate's memory? But Kakashi did not have time to voice his opinion as the Sandame started again. First, Obito would not even think of giving one student preference over another. "That is something that your sensei tried to teach you," he began. "Second, your tea is the exact image as your old one. You have a famous teacher, except that in this new team the instructor seems to like playing favorites. You have a prodigy, a girl who tries to keep everyone together, and a boy that some consider thrash but actually has incredible potential." The thread stated. "Now tell me, who has Obito's position in this team?" Sarutobi questioned. Kakashi was silent for a few seconds. Slowly, the shame that he felt started to turn into anger. "So you want me to leave Sasuke and go train Naruto, since he's your favorite?" The copy ninja did not ask. "No, I just want you to stop saying that it is because of Obito," the Hokage stated firmly. "The truth is that you want to train Sasuke simply because of his natural talent, and because he reminds you of how you used to be," the Sandame said, raising his voice. "It's not that." Kakashi tried to defend himself. "Yes, it is," the third insisted. "Because if you would have had the slightest bit of interest in Naruto, you would have found out that you owed to Obit to take care of him," the Hokage said. Deep in his heart, the seasoned shinobi was going to enjoy seeing Kakashi's face after the Jounin heard what he was about to reveal. "What do you mean?" the silver-haired man asked with caution. Sarutobi continued to stare down the younger man. "You never bothered to find out who Naruto's mother was, did you, Kakashi?" the Hokage questioned. Now Kakashi was confused. "What does Naruto's mother have to do in all of this?" the copy ninja asked. If you have bothered to investigate, you would have found out that Naruto's mother was Uchiha Kagome. The Sandaime finished. The silver-haired man was surprised once again. That piece of information had shocked him beyond anything that they had talked about until then. You don't mean? The man said weakly. Yes, Naruto's mother was Uchiha Obito's sister. The Hokage responded. Naruto is your fallen teammate's nephew. He's more connected to that eye of Yoru than Sasuke could ever be. Sarutobi revealed. Kakashi sat down as his shock had not subsided completely. The silver-haired shinobi brought his hand up to his covered eye. How could he have done this? How could he have done this to Naruto? To Obito? To his own sensei? Does he have a Sharingan? Kakashi finally asked. Even thought the Hokage would have very much enjoyed telling the Jounin the truth. He had already promised Naruto that he would not. No, he answered. You know that the Namikaze and the Uchiha clan were very different. I do not think that Naruto would be able to activate it since it seems that his Namikaze heritage have overpowered the Uchiha. Kakashi nodded numbly. And you do not have to worry about Naruto's training anymore. The third continued. From now until the Chunin exam starts, I will be supervising his training. The Sandaime finished. The copy ninja nodded once again and asked to be dismissed. The Hokage knew that Kakashi had a lot to think about and decided to let him go. The silver-haired Jounin walked aimlessly through the village for hours. It was almost 6 o'clock in the afternoon, around the time when rain started to fall, that Kakashi found himself in front of the memorial stone. The man fell on his knees and stared at the name Uchiha Obito. I'm sorry, he muttered. The Hokage is right. The reason why I wanted to train Sasuke was because he's a prodigy and I've been using your name as a way to justify myself. The Jounin admitted. And to top it all, I ignored and neglected Naruto, my student, your Nephao, Sensei's son. He chocked for a second. I failed you and Minato-sensei. Please, forgive me. Kakashi begged and finally started his way home. On the way, tears fell from both his eyes and beneath his headband. It was the morning of the Chunin exam and Naruto was currently at the Hokage's office. The Sandaime had called him to the tower earlier that morning, telling him that he needed to meet him right away. 5 minutes later, the BloodLine was knocking on the Hokage's window, and now he was waiting around as the seasoned shinobi searched the room for something. Ah, here it is, Sarutobi exclaimed as he held a scroll. Naruto noticed that the Namikaze clan's symbol was imprinted on the scroll's seal. What is that, old man? The Genin asked, looking at the parchment with curiosity. Well, since you have done so well in your training and learned very single jutsu in the scrolls I gave you, I have decided to use this. He signaled to the scroll. Think of it as a present for all of your hard work. The Sandaime gave the young man the parchment. It is a summoning scroll for an ancient weapon. The third explained. Only a member of the Namikaze clan are able to summon it and use it. The Hokage said, smiling. The hand seals necessary for the summoning are inside as well. Naruto opened his present. Inside were the series of hand seals needed, a bunch of stuff he ignored, and some sort of symbol similar to the Namikaze insignia as its center. Normally, you would need to carry the scroll everywhere and use it to perform the summoning judas by placing a bit of your blood into the seal. The third commented, but since this is a specific clan judas, you can replace the scroll with a summoning tattoo. In fact, if you hurry, you could get the tattoo done before the Chunin exam starts, Naruto-kun. The Hokage said, smiling at the young shinobi. The spiky-haired blonde closed the scroll and looked at the Hokage. Thanks, old man. The Jinchuriki said with a smile as he turned around and jumped out of the window. Several hours later, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi were standing outside room 301, waiting for the last member of their team. Kakashi-sensei, where is Naruto? Sakura asked. The exam begins in a few minutes, and he still hasn't shown up. The Uchiha was pacing in the hall anxiously. Is he coming? The young man asked. I'm sure he is. The silver-haired Jounin responded. He'll be here, don't worry, he said, his eyes shifting back and forth, almost nervously. But before he does, there is something really important that I need to talk to you two about. He suddenly started again. It's about Naruto. You see, during this past month he has sort of changed. The man informed. What do you mean, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked in confusing. How did he change? Kakashi did not really how to answer the girl's question. The Hokage had only said that Naruto was not the same anymore, but he had not given any specifics, and the silver-haired shinobi had been unable to muster enough courage to face the spiky-haired boy during the previous month. In fact, the famed Nin was not sure if he would be able to face him now. Before the Jounin had time to make up an answer for the pink-haired Kunoichi's question, all three Leaf Nins heard footsteps come from down the hall. All three turned around to see who was coming. They tried to figure out who was walking towards them, but it was not until they saw the whisker marks on his face that they recognized him. Naruto, Sakura said in a low voice. The two Genin were left dumbfounded. Their teacher saying that the blonde had changed was a massive understatement, since, from their perspective, it seemed that the boy had undergone a complete transformation. His orange jumpsuit and blue sandals were gone. Now the spiky-haired teen wore a pair of black sandals, dark blue pants, a navy color undershirt, and a black, long-sleeved jacket over it. A spiral symbol was present on the backside of his jacket and on the shoulder, and his hair had grown a lot longer during the masked month since it almost covered his leaf headband now. Naruto passed them without saying a single word. The only proof of acknowledgement between the members of Team 7 was the small second in which the blonde Genin looked directly at his teammate's eyes. When the Jinchuriki was in front of the door, he stopped and looked back. "It's time for us to enter," Naruto said with a monotonous voice as he pushed the door open. All three Genin entered the testing room. Immediately, they were welcomed with the glares from all other participants. Sasuke-kun. Suddenly, a blue and yellow appeared on Team 7's field of view and lashed itself onto the Uchiha. Anger started to seep into Sakura right away. "Stop bothering Sasuke-kun, Ino pig," Sakura shouted at the girl that was hugging the raven-haired boy. "This is so troublesome," a black-haired boy said lazily as he approached the group, while a boy eating potato chips followed fight behind him. Naruto, who was not paying much attention to the two girls bickering, turned his gaze towards his former classmates Shikamaru and Chuji as they stood before the group for a second before looking back up to the roof. "Whoa, I that Naruto. I can't be." He never looked so serious or stood so quiet before, the Nara though as he regarded the blonde leaning against the wall. "Well, it seems that the rookie nine are all together again." An arrogant voice was heard as Kiba made his way towards the others, his dog, Akamaru, barking from inside of the boy's jacket. Behind the Inuzuka were a blue-haired girl with pale eyes and a boy wearing sunglasses. Hinata and Shino followed the hooded teen as he reached the group. Kiba took a second to look at everyone. "Hold on a second," he suddenly said. "Where is the dope? I don't see him anywhere." The brown-haired boy wondered out loud. It was at that moment that the member of the Rookie Nine felt a strong, aggressive presence spike up in the room. All of their eyes turned to the source, and, for the first time, that the rest of Teams 8 and 10 noticed the blonde leaning against the wall. "Naruto, is that you?" Kiba called out. "Do you've changed?" The Inuzuka said as he walked towards the spiky-haired boy. The hooded teen stopped on his track the moment his eyes met Naruto's. A cold chill went down the brown-haired boy's back. "Hey, Billboard Brow, what happened to Naruto?" Ino asked in a whisper as she moved closer to her former best friend. The pink-haired girl bit her lips. "I don't know Ino Pig," she answered. "It's the first time that I've seen him in a month. Something must have happened during that period of time." The Haruno said. "You guys are really causing a bad first impression," a gray-haired Leaf Nin wearing glasses said as he walked towards them. "Especially the blonde one with the attitude." Sasuke immediately stepped forward. "And who are you supposed to be?" the raven-haired boy asked the older shinobi. "My name is Yakushi Kabuto," the young man responded. "And you guys should try to keep a low profile. You are the Rookie Nine after all, already infamous around here, and this year's bunch is pretty tense as it is," he commented as he glanced around the room. "In all my year of taking these exams, I've never seen such a touch group of genins brought together." The younger Nins looked around as well. All they found were glares. For example, Kabuto started again. "You have the team from Hidden Rain. They're extremely irritable. Not to mention the genins from Suna, especially the one with the gourd on his back. He gives me the creeps," the gray-haired teen admitted. "You seem to know a lot about this exam," Sakura commented with curiosity. "Well, that comes with the territory when this is your 7th time taking the exam," Kabuto said, blushing slightly in embarrassment and scratching the back of his head. But each try bring new things, he said as he composed himself. Like the team from Otogakure, it's the first time in this exam, and they just get to send one team since there's such a small village. The gray-haired Jinin informed. Suddenly, someone from the crow threw a pair of kunai at Kabuto. The leaf Jinin was able to dodge them with ease, but then a boy covered in bandaged appeared right in front of the gray-haired Jinin and swung his fist forward at the Konoha nin's face. Just barely, Kabuto was able to move his head back and evade that attack as well. When everything seemed fine, the leaf Jinin's glass suddenly broke and he started spewing blood from the mouth and the ears. Don't think lightly of the sound, the bandaged boy said as a girl with long hair and boy with blue-haired walked forward and stood by him. Yeah, by the end of the exam, all three of us Oto Nin will be. The boy started to say but suddenly stopped when he felt something on the back of his neck. Between him and the bandaged Jinin stood Naruto with a kunai held up to both of their necks. I think that the two of you should calm down, the blonde said in a monotonous tone. Unless you want to start something. Naruto finished, pushing the blades even closer to their necks. Do not underestimate me. Don't think lightly of the sound, the bandaged boy said as a girl with long hair and boy with blue-haired walked forward and stood by him. Yeah, by the end of the exam, all three of us Oto Nin will be. The boy started to say but suddenly stopped when he felt something on the back of his neck. Between him and the bandaged Jinin stood Naruto with a kunai held up to both of their necks. I think that the two of you should calm down, the blonde said in a monotonous tone. Unless you want to start something. Naruto finished, pushing the blades even closer to their necks. The sound shinobi were astonished. They had seen the blonde Jinin leaning against the wall and away from the rest of the group before they attacked. None of them sensed him move until he appeared between them. Before things could escalate, the doors to the room were pushed wide open and the instructors appeared. Quiet down, a leaf Nin with scars on his face exclaimed, causing many of the Jinin present to jolt in surprise before he walked into the room followed by several Chunin. I do not want any trouble between Leaf and Sound, the tall man firmly stated as he glared down at Naruto and the Oto ninjas. The blonde looked straight back at the older shinobi's eyes, but nevertheless he pulled his blades back and moved away from the Sound Jinin. Now, my name is Marino Ibiki, the man announced to the rest of the room, and I will be your instructor for the first part of the Chunin exam, he declared before slamming the large stack of papers he had been carrying in the desk at the front of the room. Take your seats so we may begin. The Jounin finished. Quietly, Naruto moved to his seat without saying anything to his teammates or to his former classmates. As he sat there, the spiky-haired boy looked to his side just as a very nervous Hinata took the seat next to her. Every so often, the Hyuga would steal a glance at the blonde as she fidgeted with her fingers. The Uzumaki could see that the Kunoichi was a nervous wreck. Whether it was because of the exam or because of his display with the Sound Nin, the Sharingan user did not know, but still felt guilty about it. So then, for the first time in the last month, Naruto gave a small smile when he knew she was looking, hopping at someone reassured the young girl. Her face got several shades redder, but nevertheless the Hyuga seemed calmer afterwards. A couple of hours later, the members of Team 7 were waiting for the second part of the exam to start. At least that tedious first part is done with. Naruto thought. That test's intentions could not have been clearer. He reasoned as his hand checked that all his gear was ready for the next phase. With all the Chunin in the room and so much emphasis on cheating, it was obvious what they wanted. The Jinchuriki reasoned. Even though the Uzumaki had deduced the objective of the written test, he had decided to tempt his fate and prove his theory. A light chuckle escaped the blonde. I kind of wish I could see that Jounin's face when he finds my test, he thought as his mind drifted to the piece of paper back in the room in which he had only written his name and left everything else blank. Hearing his teammate's quiet laugh, Sakura glanced at Naruto nervously. She had been beyond shock at how much he had changed in such a short time, and the fact that he had barely said anything to her or to Sasuke made her even more worried. Feeling eyes on him, the Sharingan user glanced at his side once again, this time finding his pink-haired teammate observing him. The Haruno waited a couple of seconds as she gazed at the blonde sapphire eyes. The twinkle in those eyes that the spiky-haired boy had always directed at her was completely missing. Instead, they seemed passive, perhaps even dull, as if he could not care any less about what she had to say. Gathering her courage, Sakura finally spoke up. Naruto, she started, but her words were cut off when the gates to the forest suddenly opened. Immediately, all the genin rushed in to start the second phase of the exam. The killer intent emanating from the forest was enough to wipe everything else away from the genin's minds. I had expected to run into more challenges by now. Naruto pondered as he and the rest of Team 7 sat on a small clearing, taking a break 5 hours into the second part of the exam. So far, all that we have seen was a weak group of Rainin, and they ended up running away soon after. The blonde thought with a bit of disappointment. During these last couple of hours, the members of Team 7 had come to the silently agree to continue to make their way deeper into the forest while keeping an eye out for any team that might be carrying the Earth scroll they needed to pass. In all honesty, Naruto had expected to find several teams within the time period that had passed, but he had been severely wrong. I'm going to go ahead and scout the area, the blonde suddenly announced, surprising the other two genin with the longest sentence he had said to them since that fateful day on the bridge. Before either of the two was able to recompose and object, the spiky-haired boy had already disappeared among the trees. A sight escaped Sakura. What? What do you think happened to him? She asked the raven-haired boy near here, her worries about their teammates' sudden and drastic change having become too much to bear in silence. I don't know. Sasuke responded simply with a frown. He definitely feels odd. He added as he recalled how the blonde acted the last time the Uchiha had seen him and how different it was from his current attitude. It's like he. The boy stopped in mid-sentence when he suddenly felt a terrifying amount of chakra being gathered somewhere close by. Too close for the Sharingan user's comfort. Sakura, move out of the way, he shouted. The two Leaf Nin jumped from where they were sitting just before a powerful blast of wind burst right through with enough force to tear a tree off its place. Immediately activating his Sharingan, Sasuke started to look around the forest for the source of the attack. So there you are. A menacing voice echoed through the surroundings. Sasuke-kun, it added before a grass Nin appeared in front of the two genin. Amaterasu, Naruto exclaimed seconds after activating his Sora Sharingan. Immediately, the giant snake that was about to swallow him whole was completely covered in black flames. To its credit, the giant reptile continued its attack as its entire body burned, forcing the spiky-haired boy to jump back a couple of branches. Eventually, the snake stopped advancing and, after some squirming, finally dropped dead in the middle of the forest, the black flames still eating its body away. The Uzumaki observed the dead animal for a couple of seconds. That was weird. The Jinchuriki said to himself as he remembered how the snake had ignored its wounds to continue attacking him. It almost looked as if the snake had been sent after me specifically. He commented before the Sharingan disappeared from his eyes. Suddenly, Naruto felt two chakra signatures spike in the direction in which he had left his teammates. One of them was familiar and around the level of a Chunin. The blonde could easily recognize it as Sasuke's, but the other one he could not readily identify. It felt like a Jounin, and a very powerful one, not as strong as Itachi's, but just as menacing. Not liking the feeling of that chakra, the Jinchuriki dashed off back towards his teammates. It took him a short while to get back to the clearing, but what he found there shocked the young boy to the core. A disfigured grass, Nin was biting Sasuke on the neck as the raven-haired genin agonized in pain. Rage started to fill the blonde's body. The grass Nin finally let the Uchiha fall limply to the ground. Sasuke-kun, Sakura screamed, rushing to catch the raven-haired boy's unconscious body. Taking advantage that his presence had not been noticed, the blonde quickly formed a series of hand seals. Gakakyu no Jutsu, he said before blowing a large fireball out of his mouth towards the grass Nin. Unfortunately, the strange shinobi saw the large fire jutsu approaching and had more than enough time to move clear out of the way of the blast. The long-haired man took a few seconds to regard the blonde in amusement. I thought that my snake would have been enough to take care of you, the disfigured Nin said. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Who are you? He asked. There is no way you are a genin. The Jinchuriki stated firmly. A chuckle escaped the grass Nin. Well, aren't you more perceptive than I gave you credit for, Naruto-kun? He commented before bringing one of his hands up to his face and actually ripping the skin off. What was left was an incredibly pale face with yellow eyes that resembled a serpent's. Despite himself, the spiky-haired body took a step back on the branch he was standing on. He recognized the face, not just from the Konoha history books, but also from a picture in the Sandame's office. You, the snake Sannin. The old geezer's former student, Orochimaru. The Genin exclaimed. A delighted laugh escaped the pale man. Right again, Naruto-kun. The legendary shinobi said with amusement. So now, if you know who I am and what I am capable of, why don't you just take your teammates and walk away? He smiled wickedly. I would really like Team 7 to continue to the third phase of the Chunin exam. The Sannin added. Naruto narrowed his eyes and let out a growl. Do you think I'm scared of you? The snake summoner's smile widened. Well, there are several villages that are still recovering from missions I carried out in there that would think so. The Jinchuriki's at being made light of. I'm not stupid, he stated. I know that you were chased out of the village by the Sandame and are still considered a high priority, missing Nin. The spiky-haired boy pointed out. If you were to use your full power, it would be the same as to lighting up a huge neon sign over your head saying, please, third, come and get me. As she held Sasuke's body, Sakura was being quickly overwhelmed by fear. In front of her was a man that people said was as powerful as a Hokage and as vicious as a Bijou. And to top it all off, Naruto was challenging him. The blonde had changed yet again. Gone was the cold and aloof boy that she had seen walking toward them at the beginning of the exam, and in his stead there was menacing warrior giving off wave after wave of killer intent. Suddenly, Orochimaru started to laugh out loud. Haha, I knew you were unpredictable, Naruto-kun, but I never thought you were this much fun, he exclaimed as he continued to laugh. Very well then. I will fight you at the same level I fought Sasuke-kun. Let's see how long you can last. The Sannin finally agreed before staking a fighting stance. In a flash, both Naruto and Orochimaru lunged towards each other. Fist met fist, sending a small shockwave that shook the leaves on the trees. The pale man tried to kick the spiky-haired boy, but the blonde was able to block the incoming strike with ease using his forearm. The Jinchuriki then tried to deliver a punch of his own to the Sannin's jaw. However, before his attack could connect, he saw another fist flying straight towards his face. Naruto switched from offensive to defensive in less than a second as he moved his arms to block Orochimaru's punch. Unfortunately, the attack still carried more than enough strength to send the young boy a couple of feet back. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The Genin immediately called out, making two clones appear next to him. The three boys immediately charged forward at the Sannin. The clones moved in from the sides while Naruto went for a frontal assault. However, older Shinobi was able to block all of the attacks simultaneously and push Naruto and his clones back. All three blondes took out a couple of shuriken each and hurled at Orochimaru. As the spinning blades flew through the air towards their target, Naruto and his clones cried out in unison. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Immediately, the 6 blades in mid-flight multiply to over 100. Orochimaru jumped off the branch he had been standing on to avoid the massive amount of weapons flying towards him. The moment he landed back on a branch, he was instantly surrounded by the 3 blondes, each already driving their attacks towards the black-haired man as they started to pump more chakra into their movements. At his current, heavily restricted power level, it was starting to prove difficult for the Sannin to keep up with the Genin and his 3 clones. Despite what his intel had gathered, the original Naruto was actually faster and stronger than Sasuke, while his clones were at least on par with the Uchiha. After being put on the defensive for far longer than his pride would allow it, Orochimaru finally found an opening and managed to deliver powerful blows to both of the clones. When the Bunshin disappeared in a cloud of smoke, the real Naruto used it as cover to land a powerful punch at the pale man's face, sending the Sannin flying straight into a tree. However, before the blonde was able to continue his attack, the older shinobi rose on of his hands, and a pair of snakes immediately came out of his sleeve, lunging themselves at the boy. Naruto quickly took out a kunai and beheaded both snakes with one swift movement. The Jinchuriki wasted no time and charged towards the Sannin as he readied his blade. Orochimaru easily blocked his opponent's kunai strike, but the Genin immediately dropped the weapon and used his now free hand to grab onto the pale man's forearm. The spiky-haired boy spun his body in the air and delivered a powerful kick onto the Sannin's head, sending him flying off the tree branch. Even his body landed. Naruto was already making hand seals. "Entenkawa no jutsu," the blonde exclaimed. Immediately, a powerful blast of hot air shot out of the Genin's mouth, hitting Orochimaru with full force and slamming his body on the ground far away with a thunderous impact. Instead of relaxing, the Jinchuriki started to frantically search his surroundings. The next second, Orochimaru suddenly burst out of the groan below the Genin's branch and jumped straight towards the boy with a kunai in hand. Acting out of instinct, the blonde jumped to a higher tree branch to avoid the attack. "Kukuku, I must say, you are leaving me quite surprised, Naruto-kun," the Sannin commented as if he was having the time of his life. Naruto glared down at his opponent. "You shouldn't have underestimated me," he said. "I'm strong, stronger than you could ever imagine," the Uzumaki exclaimed as he activated the Sora Sharingan and looked straight into Orochimaru's eyes. "A secret. Kukuku, I must say, you are leaving me quite surprised, Naruto-kun," the Sannin commented as if he was having the time of his life. Naruto glared down at his opponent. "You shouldn't have underestimated me," he said. "I'm strong, stronger than you could ever imagine," the Uzumaki exclaimed as he activated the Sora Sharingan and looked straight into Orochimaru's eyes. It was as if time had suddenly stopped for the Sannin as all of the thoughts in his head were wiped out, leaving space only for the pair of navy blue eyes with white comas that were firmly starting into his serpent-like eyes. Too lost in his own pondering, the pale man almost missed when the young blonde opened his mouth and muttered the word Amaterasu. Acting out of instinct more than anything else, the snake summoner immediately jumped onto another tree. The next second, the branch where he had been standing on burst into black flames that consumed it in a matter of seconds. Orochimaru's eyes quickly shifted back and forth between Naruto's eyes and the black flames he had conjured. "Impossible," he whispered, holding his gaze on the flames before starting at the Genin again. "How can you have a Sharingan?" the Sannin asked in a low voice. The mirth he had when he was mocking the young man was completely gone. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he looked down at his hand for a couple of seconds before answering. "You ask how I can have it," the spiky-haired boy repeated before suddenly closing his hand in a tight fist. "I would have thought it would be obvious. This is the Sora Sharingan. This is my bloodline," the Uzumaki firmly stated. The Genin's answer failed to satisfy the older shinobi as his face changed from shock to anger. Taking a few seconds, Orochimaru composed himself. "I always did find it odd how my spies could not get any information about your heritages," the black man commented. "I could guess who your father was due to your physical characteristics and the circumstances regarding your birth, but your mother?" the Sannin wondered out loud. The blonde's Sharingan eyes narrowed at the man's words. "Kukuku." A low chuckle escaped Orochimaru. "I see now. So this is the result of combining the Uchiha and Namikaze bloodlines," he said. "But to be able to use techniques unique to the Manjikyu Sharingan. Now that is impressive," the snake summoner commented with a smirk. Having heard enough, the blonde jumped forward and immediately appeared in front of Orochimaru. The Jinchuriki drove his fist into the Sannin's stomach, sending the older man flying into a tree. "Having the Sharingan helps me regulate the chakra throughout my body, giving me almost perfect chakra control," he revealed. "Plus it allows me to see when my opponents are gathering chakra to attack or flexing their muscles when they are about to defend themselves." Orochimaru glared at the Genin. "Yes, I know how the Sharingan works," the Sannin commented as the young man started advancing towards him, forcing the man to continue putting distance between them. The older shinobi was in a bit of a conundrum. One part of him was dying to know what the spiky-haired boy and his strange Sharingan could do, but the other was aware that in his restricted state he might not be able to beat the Jinchuriki, and going all out was out of the question because, if the third became aware of his presence, his whole plan would be ruined. Taking advantage that his opponent's mind seemed to be distracted, Naruto quickly performed a series of hand seals. Gakakyu no Jutsu. Immediately, another enormous fireball came out of the Leaf Nin's mouth and shot towards the black-haired man. Orochimaru had foreseen the incoming attack and easily jumped out of the way. Unfortunately, the spiky-haired boy had jumped even higher than him and proceeded to drive his hell right to the top of the missing Nin's head, sending him crashing down to the ground. The Sannin was able to land on his feet, but before he could straighten himself up, he felt another punch dig into his stomach. As the snake summoner's body was pushed back by the punch, Naruto quickly delivered a powerful kick into his ribcage, sending his body flying sideways onto a tree. Immediately, the Sharingan user chased after his opponent. Orochimaru was able to stop two of the Jinchuriki's fists, but the third one connected with his chin. The black-haired man's body was actually raised a couple of inches into the air by the Jinnin's uppercut. The Uzumaki proceeded to drive a powerful kick into the Sannin's airborne body, brutally slamming it back into the tree behind them. "I told you, I'm strong," Naruto muttered. Orochimaru growled under his breath. "Cheeky brat, but if I use any more power, I would risk the chance of being discovered here," he thought. "And any jutsu I could be copied by him, and adding to his firepower would be counterproductive to my plans." The snake summoner reasoned. The older shinobi suddenly took out a pair of kunai and hurled them at the blonde. Naruto was able to dodge the incoming blades with ease and dashed towards the missing Nin. The Sannin blocked the Jinchuriki's punch and tried to connect one of his own, but instead his fist was stopped by the blonde. Having a clear opening, the Uzumaki delivered a powerful punch on Orochimaru's stomach, leaving the pale man gasping for air as the Sharingan user continued his attack by driving another fist to the side of the missing Nin's face. Orochimaru was sent flying to the side, his body bouncing off the ground as his momentum died out. "I guess I had my fun for the day," the older shinobi thought as he immediately stood back up and jumped onto a tree with the intention of making his escape. Seeing his opponent trying to get away, Naruto immediately took out a kunai and threw it at the Sannin's direction. The snake summoner saw the weapon flying towards him and moved his body safely out of the way. It was not until the kunai flew past him that the pale man realized that there was an explosive tag tied to it. "Amaterasu," the young Jinchuriki said. Immediately, the small blade and the piece of paper were engulfed in black flames. The explosion that ensued sent the Sannin crashing back down onto the ground once again. By the time that the black-haired man's body hit the ground, Naruto had already finished the hand seals he needed for his next move. "Kakugen Kengoku no Jutsu," Naruto called out. Immediately, for stone walls bust out of the ground around the Sannin, encasing him. Orochimaru looked up at the only exit in his prison to find the blonde already standing on its edge. Naruto looked down at the former Leaf Nin with his Sora Sharingan. "Amaterasu," the Uzumaki repeated, conjuring more black flames that immediately filled the inside of the prison. A second later, the whole stone construct exploded as the body of a giant snake fell lifelessly into the ground. Moments later, Orochimaru burst out of the serpent's body completely unharmed by the flames. "Kakuku, that was a very clever strategy, Naruto-kun. I applaud you," the older shinobi commented in an amused tone. "It is a true shame that I cannot have your body instead. Between you and Sasuke-kun, it is clear that you are the better vessel, but I guess he would have to do," he said with a thoughtful look. Naruto narrowed his eyes at those words. "So that's your plan?" he questioned in disgust. "Why do you want his body?" the Jinchuriki demanded. A chuckle escaped the pale man. "For the Sharingan, of course. With it, I will be one step closer to my ultimate goal," he announced. "Make sure to nurture your Naruto-kun. I really want to find out what those eyes of yours are capable of seeing," Orochimaru added before leaves suddenly started swirling around him. Before the Genin could react, the Sannin had disappeared. The blonde continued looking around for a couple of seconds and tried to sense the missing Nin's chakra. Not finding anything, the spiky-haired boy finally lowered his guard and deactivated his Sharingan. Still holding on to Sasuke's body, Sakura was hyperventilating as she watched her blonde teammate finally turn towards them and drop down to the ground. The Kunoichi's mind raged as the Uzumaki approached. Naruto, Sharingan, Orochimaru, Sasuke-kun. Just what the hell is going on? The Haruno's thoughts were a complete mess as she had to concentrate not to start shaking. It was not long before Naruto was already standing over the two other members of Team 7. Without saying anything to the pink-haired girl, the Uzumaki crouched down, picked the Uchiha's body, and proceeded to prop him over his shoulder and start walking away. We have to find some place safe for him to recuperate, the spiky-haired boy finally said. Her teammate's sudden words finally snapped Sakura out of her stupor. Naruto, what? What was that all about? She tripped over her words as she tried to get the question out. A Sharingan. You have a blue Sharingan? She finally asked. The Uzumaki stopped in his tracks and remained silent for a few seconds. You cannot tell anyone. Got it, Sakura? Naruto declared without even looking back before starting to walk again. In the back of her mind, the young woman noted the lack of the chan suffix after her name. But, how? The girl stammered. Sakura. The blonde barked out her name, causing the pink-haired girl to flinch. I am not playing here. You have to keep what you saw a secret, do you understand? Naruto asked as he finally looked back at his teammate. The Haruno was barely able to suppress a gasp. The blonde's eyes, that had been dull and lifeless when she saw them just an hour before, were stormy and chaotic. There were so many emotions reflected in those sapphire eyes that the Kunoichi could not even begin to discern one from the other. Nah, Naruto, she called out softly after him. If the spiky-haired boy heard her, he chose to ignore her. Instead, he continued walking with Sasuke's unconscious body still on his shoulder. I understand, Sakura answered, letting a few tears fall silently to the ground before following her teammates. Lingering bitterness. Naruto sat on a clearing with his back pressed against a tree. Just a short distance away, Sakura sat right next to the still unconscious Sasuke, her eyes shifting nervously back and forth between her sleeping teammate and her blonde one. They were already on the second day of the Chunin exam, yet after the bizarre incident with the notorious missing Nin, Orochimaru, there had barely been any words spoken between the members of Team 7. Instead, everything that she had witnessed in the past 24 hours had been left to simmer inside the pink-haired girl's mind, where it had been progressively eating her up from inside since. The situation has proven too much for the Haruno to handle. In the back of her mind, she briefly wondered if she was perhaps still on her bed sleeping through the actual exam and caught in a dream that started with a completely changed and cold Naruto and ended with an unconscious and wounded Sasuke. A short, mirthless laugh escaped the pink-haired Kunoichi when she realized how much she wished she was currently dreaming. For his part, Naruto rather liked the silence. After a close encounter with an S-ranked missing Nin, it was the perfect thing to calm him down. For the past 24 hours, the conversation between the Genins were limited to timid and hushed questions from Sakura, short and dry answer from the blonde, and the occasional pained grunt from the unconscious Uchiha. The sudden sound of a chuckle from his teammate finally snapped the Jinchuriki out of his thoughts. I'm going to go look for the Earth Scroll, Naruto declared as he stood up. Sakura was caught off guard by the mere fact that the blonde had spoken with a complete sentence. What? Wait, she struggled to say, tripping over her own words. We can't wait any longer for Sasuke to wake up. The more time we waste, the more difficult it will be to find one, the spiky-haired boy firmly stated before starting to walk toward the edge of the clearing. Having regained some of her composure, the young Kunoichi stood up as well. But Sakura tried to protest, wanting to say that it would be dangerous for the blonde to go off on his own. But then she caught herself when memories of the fight she had witnessed the day before flooded back into her mind, showing the girl how wrong her assessment of her teammate was. Naruto stopped walking for a couple of seconds and carefully looked back over his shoulder at the rest of Team 7 before returning his gaze forward and continuing on his way. With each step that the blonde took away from them and into the depths of the forest, Sakura could feel her strength being zapped away until her legs finally gave out, and she fell down sitting on back on the floor. The Kunoichi's gaze fell on her unresponsive crush. In the short time since the second part of the Chunin exam started, she had witnessed more unbelievable events that she ever had in her whole life. And this is coming from a genin that accidentally stumbled upon an A-rank mission. The Haruno reasoned as she sat there almost by herself. Unlike when she first entered, the forest of death now felt eerily quiet to her. In the silence, Sakura thought that if she concentrated hard enough, she could still hear the echo of Naruto's fight with Orochimaru. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Naruto's blue and white Sharingan glaring back at her. The mere thought made the pink-haired girl shiver in a mixture of fear, confusion, and curiosity. She could not said that blonde had gotten stronger. That word did not even begin to cover it. Instead, the former class clown, dead last goofball, had simply become powerful. More powerful than any Genin Sakura had ever seen, and that list included Sasuke. About 25 minutes had passed since Naruto left in search for an Earth Scroll, and Sakura had been left behind to ponder on her thoughts. Unexpectedly, the Kunoichi was snapped out of her deep train of thought by a sudden presence nearby. Looking around, the Haruno hoped to see her spiky-haired teammate walking into the clearing with the scroll in hand because, if he wasn't him, the girl was unsure that she could protect Sasuke for whatever new horror the Forest of Death was about to throw at them. A faint thud sound caused Sakura to look up at one of the trees at the edge of the clearing, and immediately her hopes were crushed. "What do you want?" The Kunoichi asked, trying to muster as much menace and confidence as she could while taking out a kunai and placing her body in front of the unconscious Uchiha. The three members of the sound team looked down at the Leaf Genin before sharing a chuckle between all three of them. "It does not concern you," the bandaged shinobi informed. "We're here after the Uchiha, and if you try to get in our way, we will not hesitate to kill you," the black-haired boy said, unable to hide the glee in his words. To her credit, Sakura did not back down. She was prepared to defend Sasuke no matter what happened next. Another laugh was shared between the Odo Nin as they saw the pink-haired girl tighten her grip on her kunai. The bandaged boy rolled up his sleeve, reveal some sort of large device strapped to his forearm. However, Sakura was only able to look at it for a single second because, on the next one, all three of them charged towards her at incredible speed. "I give up. I give up. You can have our scroll." An IWA shinobi screamed and flailed his one free arm before using it to take out an earth scroll from his pocket and throwing it to the side. As a response to his words, Naruto released the arm he held behind the stone ninja's back and unceremoniously let him fall face first into the ground. "Quick, let's go? This Leaf Nins are crazy," one of the Genin's teammates shouted as he helped his friend back to his, and, along with the third member of their team, quickly ran away. From his position up on the tree branches, the spiky-haired boy could see the severely beaten IW Genin fleeing from him without looking back or caring about their scroll anymore. Finally, the blonde whispered as he let out a sigh. "This is the third group I found. I was starting to think I was never going to get the damn Earth Scroll," he thought to himself before dropping down and picking up his reward for all his efforts. In the back of his mind, the Sharingan users wondered if the Waterfall and Cloud teams he had beaten up had regained consciousness yet. Placing the Earth Scroll in his pouch, the Jinchuriki took a moment to ponder over his situation and reflect. For the first time in his life, Naruto actually felt strong. All his life, he had always been running away, trying his best not to get carried over and drowned by the waves of hatred in the village. Then the incident with Itachi occurred, and after that the blonde had spent almost all of his time training with the third. His first actual battle since his change had pitted the Sharingan users against Orochimaru of all people, and even though he managed to hold his own, the boy would not kid himself and think that if the Sannin would not have crushed him in less than a second had he really wanted to. Now though, fighting against other Genin teams, Naruto felt vastly superior. He could now see the fruit of his training and all he had gained since his meeting with Itachi. It was a lot better than thinking about all he had lost on that night. Suddenly, Naruto's basking was cut short when he sensed a very strange chakra signature coming from the direction of his teammates' clearing. The chakra was not as foul as the Kyuubi's, but it still felt extremely hostile and strong. Without another thought, the blonde dashed back towards his teammates. "Damn it, are they going to get in trouble every single freaking time I leave them alone for more than a few minutes?" Naruto raged in his mind as he increased his speed. Back in the clearing, the faces of Sakura, Lee, Ino, Shikamaru, and Chuji were a mixture of surprise and terror. Soon after the initial attack, Lee and the members of Team 8 had come to Sakura's aid, but despite their best efforts, they were all eventually overpowered and beaten by the Sound Ninjas. It was at that moment that Sasuke had suddenly woken up and things turned really terrifying. After he regained consciousness, strange, dark flame-like marks appeared on the Uchiha's body as he started to emanate a menacing chakra. The raven-haired boy's face was an eerie mixture of madness and malice as he launched himself at the three Oto Nins. Within a couple of moments, Sasuke had utterly crushed all three of his opponents, much to the shock of the other Leaf Shinobi, which only increased with what happened next. Sasuke took a hold of the black-haired Sound Nin's arms, both of which he had already broken just a few minutes prior, and now seemed intent in tearing the Genin's arms off his body. Meanwhile, the Oto shinobi screamed and pleaded to be spared. Sasuke-kun, stop! Sakura could have sworn that her heart was beating louder than she screamed. Unfortunately, the pink-haired girl's words, or anyone else's in the clearing, seemed to fail to reach the hell-bent Uchiha. Suddenly, everyone present saw a dark blur swiftly pass by, and, the next thing they knew, the raven-haired boy was pinned down to the ground. That's more than enough, Sasuke. Naruto firmly stated as he looked down at his teammate straight in the eyes. Ino blinked in surprise, and a quick look at her surroundings showed that all the other Leaf Nins shared the same expression. No one had even sensed, let alone heard, the blonde approach. Get off me, loser. Sasuke growled as he tried to kick Naruto off of him. The spiky-haired boy jumped away before the foot could make contact with him. Instantly, Sasuke was back on his feet, without saying anything, and to Sakura's horror, the Uchiha quickly took out a kunai and charged towards his blonde teammate at full force. On reflex, Naruto pulled out a kunai of his own and blocked the raven-haired boy's attack. The clash between the two Leaf Genin sent a small shockwave throughout their surroundings. What the hell are you doing? The blonde asked, his voice getting colder with every word. A wicked smile appeared in Sasuke's face. I simply want to know, he started in a gleeful voice, the extent of my newfound power, he exclaimed. Both teenagers jumped backwards and, in almost synchronized precision, sent their blades flying at each other. The two kunai collided in midair and fell to the ground. I don't want to fight you, Sasuke, Naruto firmly stated, glaring at his teammate. Like you have a choice. The raven-haired boy responded before charging forwards at the blonde once again. Gritting his teeth, the Jinchuriki had no other choice but to block the incoming attack from his seemingly deranged teammate. With each punch that the Uzumaki stopped, his patience with Sasuke waned. Some distance away from the clearing, Neji watched the two genin fight each other. At one point he had considered intervening himself, if nothing else to get Lee out of the dilemma he had foolishly gotten himself caught in, lest it became detrimental to their team advancing to the next round, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, the young man watched from his position on top of a tree branch, and he could see that the blonde one was holding back his strength. However, the Uchiha seemed to be getting stronger and stronger with each passing second. Intrigued by the events unfolding before him, the Hyuga activated his Byakugan to have a better view of the fight. Meanwhile, back in the clearing, Naruto continued to block Sasuke's strikes. Slowly but surely, annoyance started to turn into anger. For his part, the raven-haired kept on attacking. With every single punch, the Uchiha could feel himself getting stronger. With every kick he felt faster, and with every step he pushed his opponent back, he felt more powerful. The blonde blocked a punch with one hand and a kick with the others, but before he could recover, he saw one more of Sasuke's punches flying swiftly towards him. With no other option, the Uzumaki had to jump away and put some distance between himself and the Uchiha. Feeling elated at seeing his opponent forced to back away, Sasuke started to make hand seals, finishing just as Naruto's feet touched the ground. Housenka no Jutsu, the young man called out before releasing a barrage of fireball out of his mouth, flying straight towards Naruto. The spiky-haired genin was not expecting something like this. Even if his relationship with Sasuke had been antagonistic at best, or even if the raven-haired boy did not seem in the right state of mind at the moment, he had never expected that his teammate would use lethal force on him. Suddenly, Images from his time trap inside the Tsukuyami world flooded into Naruto's mind, completely freezing the Jinchuriki in his place and preventing him from evading the incoming attack. Every singly fireball fell on its target. The people witnessing the fight from the edge of the clearing let out a gasp of horror. They had just seen the blonde genin get hit full force by Sasuke's lethal attack. The fireball's impact had created a large cloud of dust and smoke that prevented the spectators from seeing what damage they had done to the spiky-haired boy. A low, uncharacteristic chuckle escaped Sasuke, which soon evolved into an all-out laugh. In the raven-haired teen's tainted mind, Naruto had long since been replaced by the memory of Itachi on the night of the Uchiha massacre. "I'm strong. I'm stronger now," the lost genin proclaimed in his thoughts. Away from the commotion, Niji also displayed a look of surprise, but for very different reasons. With his Byakugan, the black-haired teen was able to see how, right before the fireballs hit, a strange, dark blue chakra had seemingly exploded from the blonde and protected him from harm. Afterwards, the Hyuga could literally see the power surging out from the spiky-haired genin. Once more, a gasp escaped the spectators as the dust started to settle and the image of an unharmed Naruto became clear. In the back of their mind, they all shared the same thought, that suddenly, the blonde felt far more dangerous than the Uchiha. Immediately, Sasuke stopped laughing. Naruto's eyes were completely clouded by fury as he glared at his teammate. The raven-haired boy smirked and started dashing towards the blonde. The Uchiha directed his fist towards the Uzumaki's face, but Naruto easily caught the incoming punch in his hand, and no matter how hard Sasuke tried to pull, he could not get his first freed from his opponent's surprisingly strong grip. The Jinchuriki took the opportunity to deliver a powerful punch on his Sasuke's stomach. The Uchiha gasped for air as the attack was strong enough to lift his body off the ground and sent him flying towards a tree. Sasuke recovered immediately and stood up. In one swift move, the genin took out a couple of shuriken and sent them flying towards Naruto. Easily evading the incoming projectiles, the blonde started to make a series of hand seals, and, immediately, Sasuke started mimicking him. Gakakyu no Jutsu. Both boys called out in unison. A pair of gigantic fireballs collided with each other in a massive explosion. Dust and smoke covered the entire clearing. Even with his Sharingan active, Sasuke could not see anything behind the thick black curtain that had risen in front of him as he started to look around for any sign of an incoming attack. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the smoke and grabbed the raven-haired genin's neck and violently pinned his body against a tree before he even had time to react. The Uchiha's back hit the trunk of the tree with such tremendous force that the impact immediately scattered most of the lingering dust. Once things became visible again, Sakura and the others were greeted by the sight of Sasuke backed up against a tree as he struggled against the iron grip Naruto had on his neck. The purple chakra returned to the Uchiha's body as if it were trying to push the blonde genin away, or at least scare him off. Nonetheless, it failed at both as the spiky-haired teen's hold did not waver. Sasuke continued to struggle to free himself. Panic started seeping in as the raven-haired boy could feel his newfound strength start to dissipate, while his opponents seemed to be increasing. The Uchiha searched for what he thought were his brother's eyes, but instead of the coldness from that night, what he found was unrelenting fury in them. Nevertheless, Sasuke still felt as weak and helpless as he did back then. Naruto could feel that his teammate was starting to lose consciousness as he saw that the flame-like pattern in his body and the dark chakra both started to retreat. In the back of his mind, the blonde wanted to let go before he seriously injured Sasuke. Unfortunately, the rage that had overwhelmed him preventing him from loosening the grip of his hand. If anything, it strengthened. Sakura watched in horror as Sasuke finally lose consciousness and Naruto still did not let go. "Naruto, stop!" The pink-haired girl screamed, but her pleas were either unheard or ignored by her teammate. Inside his mind, the part of Naruto that wanted to stop was becoming desperate. He was about to kill one of his teammates, one of the people who, despite everything, he still considered a friend, and there was some strange force that had taken over his body and was not planning to stop until the person in front of him was no more. In some level of his subconscious, just like the Uchiha had replaced him with Itachi, Naruto had replaced Sasuke with all the pain and suffering that the village had given him all his life. Suddenly, Naruto felt a tug on his jacket and something pressed against his back. The next second, he felt drops of water fall on his back and ran down. It was then that the Jinchuriki realized that Sakura had moved behind him. Her hands were desperately clenching the lower part of his jacket while her forehead was pressed against the blonde's back, right below his neck. "Naruto, please stop," she whispered. "I can't bear to watch the two of you kill each other. So please stop," the kunoichi said, choking up with her tears. The range started to dissipate off the Uzumaki, and his grip on Sasuke's neck finally loosened. Realization of what he was about to do washed over him as he let the Uchiha's body fall onto the ground. Sakura immediately let go of the blonde and went to check on the raven-haired boy. Naruto took a few steps back. "I got the Earth Scroll," he informed without even looking at his teammates. Then, without saying anything else or acknowledging any of the others present or their questions, the Jinchuriki simply walked away from the clearing. "Not a test for my power." Sasuke rubbed his neck as he waited for the first match of the third test was decided. The Uchiha's body was still sore from all that had happened in the Forest of Death. He had waken up in the last day with barely any memory of what had happened before. He remembered having waken up after the strange Nin bit him. He remembered attacking the sound Nin and Sakura pleading him to stop, and the last thing he remembered was Naruto pinning him down to the ground. After that, everything was just a blank. He had asked what had happened, but both of his teammates were reluctant of talking about it. One thing Sasuke did notice was that Naruto seemed even more distant than before, and Sakura kept on glancing nervously between the blonde and the Uchiha. Sasuke snapped out of his thought when he saw what the first match was: Inuzuka Kiba versus Uzumaki Naruto. Sasuke saw how Sakura, Lee, and the members of Team 10 tensed when they read it. The only thing was that the raven-haired boy didn't know why. The Uchiha watched his teammate leave the group without a single word to their sensei, Sakura, or to him. Sasuke's gaze was then redirected towards Team 8, where Kiba was ranting about how short the match will be. The raven-haired boy watched as the two genin face each other in the area. The only thing that was heard were Akamaru's barks. Sasuke looked at Kiba first. The dog lover had a triumphant smirk on his face, as though he had already won. Sasuke's gaze shifted to look at his teammate. If the Uchiha didn't know any better, he would say that Naruto looked bored. The match didn't seem to excite him in any way. The Chunin called Hate gave the order to start the match. "Why don't we skip the trash talk and go straight to the beating?" Kiba said, getting into fighting stance. "I'm feeling generous today, so I'm going to make this as quickly as possible." The brown-haired boy finished, while Naruto stood unmoving. Kiba started towards the blonde. "Suga!" Kiba screamed before he started spinning, creating a destructive tornado. Naruto watched the attack as it got closer and closer. At the last moment, the blonde lazily sidestepped and dodged the attack. Kiba turned around and tried one more time. Unfortunately for the dog lover, Naruto sidestepped again and evaded the attack. The blonde's lazy movements made dodging the attacks look easy. The brown-haired boy tried his luck a couple of times more without succeeding. After being unable to get a single scratch on the blonde, Kiba stopped. It was evident that he was ticked off. "Bastard," Kiba murmured as he clenched his taking 2 pills and putting one in his mouth. "Akamaru," the brown-haired shinobi said as he threw the second pill towards the dog. Suddenly, Akamaru's fur turned red as the dog jumped on his owner's back. "Jujin Bunshin," Kiba cried out as Akamaru barked. Immediately, the brown-haired boy's body turned beast-like, and the Akamaru turned into an exact copy of Kiba. "Getsuga," Kiba cried out as he and Akamaru started spinning towards Naruto. The blonde kept on dodging all of the attacks, moving on the last possible second and still without getting his cloths ragged. Kiba growled in frustration. "What's the deal?" Naruto would have never been able to dodge all of the attacks, the brown-haired boy thought. Both Kiba and Akamaru started circling Naruto. They were still using Getsuga. Naruto extended his arms and grabbed both Kiba's and Akamaru's forearms. Using their momentum, Naruto rotated on his heel and released Kiba and Akamaru, sending both of them crashing towards opposite walls. Akamaru reverted back to his dog form, while Kiba struggled to stand up. "Bastard," Kiba murmured again as he started towards the blonde with his clawed hands. Naruto dodged Kiba's swipe with ease. Immediately, the blonde drove his fist into the brown-haired boy's stomach, sending him back to the wall. Kiba stood up and dashed towards Naruto once more. The blonde started to make hand seals and gathering chakra on his index finger. Akuma Zenshin no Jutsu, Naruto said as he started towards the incoming genin. There was some sort of flash that blinded everyone in the audience. As Sasuke started to regain his eyesight, he immediately looked down at the arena. There stood Naruto behind. The blonde's right arm and index finger was extended. The Uchiha looked towards the other genin. Kiba stood frozen in mid-attack for a few seconds before the boy started screaming and clenching his head. Inside his mind, Kiba was watching how hundreds of people were slaughtered. He could hear screams as the pleaded, but it was useless. Whatever was causing this was completely merciless. Kiba then looked down to find his hands covered in blood, and then it hit him. He was the killer. He was the one who was savagely slaughtering this people. With one final scream, Kiba fell unconscious. The medic started to check Kiba's condition as Hate declared Naruto the winner. The blonde didn't give any acknowledgement of being victorious. He just walked back in the direction of his team. Sasuke's hand was trembling. Whatever Naruto had done to Kiba had possessed an evil chakra, but somehow he had the sensation that he had felt it before. The Uchiha was snapped out of his thoughts once again. Akita Yoroi versus Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke nodded towards Kakashi and started his way towards the arena where his opponent was already waiting for him. Naruto watched his teammate face off against the older Nin. The blonde felt the same evil chakra that Sasuke had used at the Forest of Death. Only this time the Uchiha was able to hold it back and still achieve a win. After the match, Sasuke was taken to the back by Kakashi. Naruto just shrugged and continued watching the third part of the Chunin exam. Naruto watched how Shikamaru defeated the Sound Kunoichi. The colored face Sannin defeated Yoroi's teammate using a puppet, and Sakura ended up in a tie with her rival Ino. The Sound Kunoichi defeated Lee's teammate, and Shino was able to beat the black-haired Sound Nin. The blonde couldn't help but smirk when Lee used the Yura Renge against the red-haired Sannin. He had heard that spandex-clad Nin just to be the Academy's deathlast before him. Sadly, Gaara was able to emerge victorious. Naruto felt something coming from Kyuubi as he watched Gaara appeared between his teammates. Naruto watched as Chuji and the last Sound Nin eliminated each other from the exam. Every one of the adult tensed up before the last match. Hyuga Hinata versus Hyuga Niji. Both genin descended to the arena. Hinata was shaking while Niji was glaring at her. "You should quit while you can, Hinata-san. You're not cut out to be a shinobi," the black-haired boy said evilly. Hinata started to back away. People shouldn't judge others. Anyone who put their hearts into everything they do and never give up can achieve anything, Naruto said loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone in the audience looked from Niji to Naruto and back again while the two genin glared at each other. Niji looked towards his cousin. The fear in Hinata's face was replaced by sheer determination. "I will never give up, Naruto-kun," the blue-haired girl thought as she activated her Byakugan. Niji activated his Byakugan too and got into fighting stance just as Hate started the match. Hinata and Niji exchanged blows using Jukin. Naruto was familiar with the style. The old geezer had made him study and practice it. The match continued, and it seemed that Hinata stood a chance of emerging victorious until Niji completely turned the tables. The black-haired boy delivered blow after blow, and it wasn't long before Hinata fell to the ground. Naruto wasn't disappointed. Hinata had proved that she isn't worthless like some people think, but he was mildly surprised that she was able to stand up again because Niji had gone unnecessarily brutal on her. It was obvious that she couldn't win anymore, but at least she demonstrated that she wasn't, by any means, weak. Niji completely lost all his self-control, and the hatred inside of him overwhelmed him. Niji dashed towards Hinata with every intention of killing his cousin. Before any of the Jounin present could react, Niji was pinned to the wall away from Hinata. Naruto had the Hyuga prodigy by the neck. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" the blonde growled. "Can't you see that she's in no condition of continuing the match?" Naruto asked. "This is none of your concern." Niji growled back, glaring at the blonde, as he tried to break free from his hold. "Naruto-kun," Hinata whispered before she felt a pain in her chest and felt unconscious. The sound of the kunoichi hitting the floor distracted Naruto. Hinata, Naruto said as he looked back without releasing Niji. The black-haired boy took the opportunity and tried to connect an attack on the blonde. Unfortunately for the Hyuga, Naruto moved his body to dodge the attack, immediately released Niji, and drove his fist straight to the Hyuga's chest, leaving the black-haired boy gasping for air. I promise, I'm going to make you pay for what you did to Hinata. Naruto said low enough for only Niji to hear. After glaring at the black-haired boy one last time, Naruto started towards Hinata, who was already surrounded by medic Nin. After a couple of minutes, all of the injured were sent to receive medical treatment, and the genin that were still in the exam, minus Sasuke, were listening to the Hokage's explanation of the next phase. Now each one will take a piece of paper, Sarutobi said as Anko, the Tokubetsu Jounin that was in charge of the second exam, passed carrying a box. Once you take your paper, please read the number on it. The Hokage added. 4 Shino. 5 Naruto. 7 Gaara. 2 Temari. 6 Niji. 1 Shikamaru. 3 Kankuro. That means he's 8. Ibiki said, while the Hokage just nodded as Ibiki started to write something. Once he finished, the Sandame spoke once again. The matches for the next round will be Nara Shikamaru versus Temari, Kankuro versus Aburame Shino, Uzumaki Naruto versus Hyuga Niji, and Gaara versus Uchiha Sasuke. Sarutobi said. Immediately, a strong killing intent was felt among the present, most of it coming from the Hyuga prodigy and the blonde genin. You have 1 month until the next round begins. I suggest that you take some time to rest and regain your strength before you start training. The Hokage said before he stood up and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Naruto started to make his way out of the arena. He knew it was just a matter of time before Sakura catches up to him. Suddenly, an immense pain went through his body. The blonde clenched his heart. It hurt every time it beat. Not again. This has been going for a month now. What is it? Naruto thought. Inside his mind, he could hear the fox laughing. Don't worry, kid. You'll find out soon enough. Kyubi managed to say between his fits of laughter. Naruto thought that only with his luck did he ended up with a demon inside his head. It had been a month now, and Naruto found a way to block Kyubi from annoying him 24/7. But the fox still found ways to get through. Asshole, murmured Naruto before as the pain subsided and he was able to continue on his way.